Food Through the Decades, Part 1. Here I've rounded up the standout dishes for every year from 1950 through to the 1960s, so that you can see what the best loved meal, food or drink was during the year you were born. From Black Forest Gateau to Frey Bentos pies, this lovely lot are a real trip down memory lane. So which is your favourite, and which ones have I forgotten to mention? 1950 Pineapple Upside Down Cake. Because sweet treats were in short supply during the years after the war, this amazingly colourful bake was welcomed with open arms when it burst onto the food scene in 1950. Made with tinned goods, pineapple upside down cake was an easy thing to whip up with your butter and sugar rations, and could make its way round a big family if sliced thinly enough. 1951 Spam. While fresh meat was still being heavily rationed, spam provided an unlikely source of protein to thousands of British families during the 1950s. Love them or hate them, spam fritters were the dish of the year. These crispy morsels were coated in batter, deep fried and served up for many a supper. 1952 Baked Alaska. This science-defying pudding wowed the masses when it was introduced in the 1950s with its hot outside and its freezing cold inside. Made with a sponge bottom, a thick layer of jam, a mound of ice cream and a baked meringue shell, it really was an impressive party centrepiece. 1953 Devilled Eggs. Liberated from egg and sugar rations, but still firmly in the grips of cheese and meat rationing, British cooks of 1953 were keen to make the most of their newfound culinary freedom. The result? Devilled eggs, of course. These curried canapes were a real favourite for serving up as a part of a party spread. 1954 Burgers and Milkshakes. 1954 saw the end of rationing altogether and the opening of the first Wimpy bars, selling burgers and milkshakes to Britain's teenagers, and they loved it. The love of all things American has stayed with us right up until today. 1955 Black Forest Gateau. With its layers of chocolate sponge, whipped cream and cherry syrup, Black Forest Gateau was the dish of the moment in 1955, after being invented in Germany some years earlier. It appeared in recipe books everywhere following its inclusion on a list of best-known German cakes in 1949. And aren't we so glad of it? This classic cake is still a favourite for many today. 1956 Coronation Chicken. Coronation chicken was invented for the coronation of Queen Elizabeth in 1953 and gathered popularity with every year that passed. In 1956, this exotic mix of cooked chicken, mayonnaise and curry powder, it truly became one of Britain's favourite lunchtime sandwich fillers and could even be found on the shelves of grocery shops pre-made. 1957 Rice Pudding. Rice pudding. A deliciously creamy dessert that was traditionally made in a pot, but somehow found its way into a tin during the First World War. Despite the tin version coming years earlier, it was 1957 that marked a huge change for the most popular brand. Ambrosia, when it had to open up a whole new factory to cope with the demand of its famous tinned pudding from the British masses. 1958 Chop Suey. A rise in immigration during the 1950s and 60s gave Brits a real taste for strong flavours from further afield. It was in 1958 was the year that Chop Suey was introduced to the menus of Butlins holiday camps, making it officially a British favourite. 1959 Arctic Roll. Birdseye inherited Arctic Roll in 1959 when it bought an Eastbourne ice cream factory, and it went on to have great success with this freezer staple of the time. Much like a traditional Swiss roll, this ice cream-filled alternative captured the hearts of those who couldn't face having to make a pudding every evening. 1960 Chicken Tikka Masala. The dramatic increase in the number of people coming to the UK from former British colonies certainly had an effect on the food us Brits were eating during the 1960s. It really was the year that Indian restaurants began to flourish, and this is when we first got our taste for one of our now popular dishes, the chicken tikka masala. 1961 Lager. Although we might think of lager as a national drink now, it wasn't actually introduced to us Brits until the 1960s. This pale, golden drink was a lighter, more refreshing alternative to British ales and stouts, and made its way into pubs up and down the country in 1961. 1962 Cheese and Onion Crisps. Going hand in hand with the favourite of 1961 lager, cheese and onion crisps were introduced in 1962 by Golden Wonder, and they joined the existing crisp flavours of ready salted and salt and vinegar, and they could be found on the back of pub bars across Britain. 1963 Duck à la Orange. Famously, one of Grace Kelly's favourite dishes, duck à la orange, was thought to be one of the most exotic flavour combinations to date in 1963. Rarely before had meat been paired with foreign fruit like oranges, and it was thought to be very of the moment. 1964 Prawn Cocktail. The pink, spicy sauce and a few baby prawns somehow combined to make a magical flavour combination, and the dish has been a firm starter staple ever since. 1965 Crepe Suzette. Following on from the 1960s duck à la orange, the next recipe to gain popularity using oranges was Crepe Suzette. The recipe was brought over from France by a handful of people, and it quickly spread to become one of the standout dishes of the year. 1966 Chicken Liver Pâté. In the 1960s, we were a lot more used to offal and using up every part of the animal, which meant chicken liver pâté quickly became one of the most loved dishes. This smooth pâté was made with brandy and butter for a real indulgent treat. 1967 Angel Delight. This oddly wobbly dessert was served up in glasses all over Britain during 1967, and it has been enjoyed by millions. 1968 Jelly and Custard. What child doesn't love jelly and custard? This school canteen favourite was made popular in the late 1960s thanks to its cheap packet ingredients and its simple flavours. 1969 Fray Bentos Pies. Fancy travelling back to 1969? Then you'll need a pie cooked in a tin. Yes, we're talking about Fray Bentos pies, the latest in a sudden lineup of convenient meals in the late 1960s. All that was required from any cook was to peel back the ring-pull tin lid and bake the pie in the oven. We would love to hear from you. What is your favourite dish, and which ones have we forgotten to mention? Please do share your memories.